Warning, this audiobook contains mature themes that are currently listed on your screen. If you don't want to hear any of these topics, please click off the video now. You have been warned.
Fallen Stars, Book 1, Frozen Sound, Chapter 1. Mosskit rigorously paced back and forth in the nursery. Today was the day he'd finally become an apprentice and start his warrior training. He was excited, but nervous, and apprehensive. To be honest, he didn't know what to feel, or what feelings were okay to express. He wanted to talk to his mother or father, but Willowsong was always on some sort of patrol, and his mother, Bristleface, always seemed to have her mind somewhere else, her gaze showing she wasn't all quiet in the present. Mosskit was a little frustrated by this.
I'm your only kit. Please be excited for me.
He paused his pacing for a moment to gather his thoughts. The cold winter breeze pierced his fur and he shivered. He resumed to pacing the nursery again, since after all it did keep him warm from the snowy morning outside.
Bristleface must be sad that Jasper Kit and Minnow Kit aren't here to become apprentices either,
Mosskit realized. His guilt swarmed over him. Mosskit felt terrible that he even thought about being frustrated at his mother on this day, since it must be a hard day for both his parents. He wished his sisters were still alive so they could all be apprentices together, and that Bristleface and Willowsong would be happy. The two cats had always seemed distant from one another, with only a few words passing between them. Maybe a hello, if even that. It's not that they hated each other at all, but their words sounded as if they were holding back tears. A voice halted his spiraling thoughts.
Mosskit, if you're going to walk back and forth, please, for the love of StarClan, go out into the clearing. You'll at least melt all the snow with that pace.
Mosskit froze and peeled around to face the cat who had told him to stop. It was one of the other nursery queens, Mackreltail. The queen was laying a couple tail lengths back with her tail wrapped around her kits, who were usually a handful, so she's probably cherishing this quiet moment. Mosskit sunk his ears and dipped his head in embarrassment.
I'm sorry, Mackreltail,
he whispered. Mosskit's eyes quickly darted towards Bristleface, hoping she would scold him too. But his mother was curled up in a far corner of the nursery, staring off in the space, not aware of what was going on around her. Mackreltail saw Mosskit look over at his mother, and she looked too, then looked back at him and sighed.
It's okay, Mosskit. But you're going to be an apprentice today, and you're already almost the size of a full-grown cat,
she purred amusingly.
The hunting patrol should be coming back any time now. Maybe you could wait for Willowsong?
Mosskit nodded and left the nursery. Mosskit's eyes were fixated at the camp entrance, his eyes peeling to see the dark gray pelt of his father Willowsong. Besides for disassociating from his emotional side, he was always the better conversationalist out of his parents. He never said much, but he did make an effort. Mosskit always assumed that his father copes by taking on multiple patrols a day, leaving camp and leaving the presence of the place where his two daughters had died. Mosskit had arrived at the entrance of the camp. A warrior by the name of Waterripple was keeping guard and eyed the kit just to make sure it wasn't a kit attempting to leave camp situation, but seeing as Mosskit only sat down and looked towards the horizon, Waterripple gave him a simple smile, nodded, and resumed his guard. Only a few minutes seemed like days, waiting for the hunting patrol to come back. His tail twitched, then wrapped around his paws. Any slight movement, whether it be the wind rattling bushes or birds taking flight, anything would draw his attention. Mosskit was in full focus. He wasn't paying attention to anything behind him, only forward, which was his real disadvantage. Before he knew it, snow covered his pelt. The instant cold of powdery snow snapped him out of his trance, and he shook his long brown fur. Two cats were laughing at him. Of course there was Waterripple, who had witnessed the whole thing, but didn't say a peep, and Mosskit turned around and saw Flutterpaw. Mosskit's shock and frustration melted the moment he saw her face, and he couldn't help but start giggling too.
I got you, Mosskit! You should have seen your face!
She purred.
Are you waiting for Willowsong?
Mosskit nodded.
Yeah, he went on the dawn hunting patrol. He should be back any time now. I just want to ask if he's going to be at my apprentice ceremony today.
Flutterpaw patted up the Mosskit and leaned into him, warming him up from where she hit him with snow.
Why wouldn't he be? All clan members go to clan meetings, even though the speech says, all cats old enough to catch their own prey.
Flutterpaw couldn't keep up the act before being engulfed in a giggle fit. Once her and Mosskit regained their composure, she continued to console him.
Obviously, Willowsong catches his own prey. He's the best hunter in the clan. And Bristleface will come too. They may not talk much, but they wouldn't miss their kit's apprentice ceremony.
I wish I could be confident enough to believe that,
Mosskit said as he hunched over.
They both will, trust me. Am I ever wrong?
Flutterpaw purred. She was right. Flutterpaw usually is never wrong. She may be silly, but she's really good at picking up cues from other cats. She always knows the right thing to say and goes about to make anyone laugh. One of the reasons Mosskit was excited for his training so he could finally be with his best friends, Flutterpaw and her brother Troutpaw. They were nice to him and would show him what they'd learn in training. They were about 3 moons older than him, so sadly they would become warriors long before he'd finished training. At least he could spend time with them, especially Flutterpaw. Her presence alone made the cold melt away. He knew logically every cat had flaws, but his heart always found Flutterpaw to be the closest thing to perfect that StarClan had ever created. Before Mosskit could answer her, he saw Flutterpaw bolt up and look at him with excitement as she gestured her paw into the distance. Willowsong and his patrol had come back. Flutterpaw had whispered in his ear that she'd see him at the ceremony and ran off in the camp. Mosskit saw his father was carrying back a blackbird, while other cats were carrying smaller, more unimpressive bits of prey. It didn't surprise Mosskit. After all, it was Leafbear, and this time of year was the hardest for RiverClan due to their diet being a majority of fish. His father, though, was more of a thinner built compared to the average RiverClan warrior, so he was quicker at catching other sorts of prey, therefore an asset when winter came around. Mosskit's chest swelled up with pride, then deflated into a sea of nervousness as Willowsong's eyes locked into his son, who was waiting for him. Willowsong politely asked Waterripple if he could take the blackbird back to the queens while he talked to Mosskit. The other cats padded away, not paying any attention to them. They were alone. Mosskit's paws trembled as he cleared his throat.
That's a nice blackbird, Dad.
Mosskit started, then got frustrated with himself.
Ask him about the ceremony,
he thought. He was thankful Willowsong was being patient. Willowsong seemed to know that wasn't what Mosskit wanted to say to him. Mosskit felt guilty for wasting his time. He built up the breath again and asked,
Are you going to be at my apprentice ceremony today? It would mean a lot if you could go. I know you're really busy.
Willowsong cut him off.
I'll be there.
He leaned in and gave his son a lick to straighten out the fur where Flutterpaw had thrown snow on him.
Get yourself ready. Bristleface and I will be there.
Willowsong saw Waterripple come back to his post. Willowsong nodded at him and resumed to join the rest of the hunting patrol. Mosskit was in utter shock, but he quickly went from shock to excitement. He never expected it. He started bouncing around like a little kit, but stopped once he realized Willowsong told him to get ready. He wanted to make them proud, so he lumbered back to camp so he could give his fur a proper cleaning.
Let all cats old enough to catch their own prey, please join here beneath the high stump for a clan meeting.
Reedstar's old voice thundered through the camp. It was time. He was going to be an apprentice. Cats of all ages were gathering, and for once, confidently, Mosskit puffed out his chest, lifted his head, and padded to the high stump. Once he made it there, his eyes gazed at the crowd of cats who had come for his ceremony. His eyes first gazed at Flutterpaw and Troutpaw, who were in the front of the crowd, smiling at him. His heart swelled, and a smile formed on his face when he saw Flutterpaw. He continued to look around, and it seemed like every cat in the clan was there. His eyes continued to dart around looking for his parents. They weren't there. His stomach instantly turned inside out. Mosskit felt like he was going to be sick. The words Reedstar was saying didn't even make a sound. The world was spinning around Mosskit, along with the thoughts of inadequacy, guilt, sadness, and frustration, so much that his eyes started to swell up. He must have looked bad, since in the corner of his eye he caught Flutterpaw, looking as if she realized his panic, while Troutpaw was a moment ahead of her, taking the first bound towards him. Mosskit picked his gaze back up as he saw, coming in the back of the group of cats came Willowsong, guiding Bristleface to sit with him to watch the ceremony.
They came,
thought Mosskit, his heart overjoyed. He still felt sick and dizzy, but he could do this. His parents were there. Troutpaw came up to him and brushed his side with his tail and looked at him, making sure he was okay. Mosskit nodded back at him. The gray Tabby Tom turned around with one last glance at Mosskit, and then returned to sit next to his sister Flutterpaw, who still looked a little upset. Mosskit wondered if his panic spell was upsetting her, but he figured he'd ask her after he got his name. Mosskit's eyes finally turned away from the gathered cats and looked at his mentor. His mentor was Thornscar. Thornscar never had an apprentice, but she was a well-known warrior, one of the best fighters in the clan. He had always heard that Thornscar was a strong cat, mainly because she was known for surviving a snake bite to her chest, which had left a scar behind. It's what the brown tabby she-cat was named for. Mosskit's chest filled up with excitement. Reedstar concluded.
Until you have received your warrior name, you'll be known as Mosspaw. Thornscar, you're ready for your first apprentice. You're confident and strong. I hope you pass these traits onto Mosspaw.
The clan cheered.
Mosspaw! 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 Mosspaw!
Mosspaw turned to Thornscar and whispered.
I'll make you proud. I promise.
Thornscar purred.
I know you will.
He was so happy. His mentor seemed excited to train him. He noticed that Flutterpaw was cheering the loudest. He was glad that Flutterpaw wasn't upset anymore, but he would still check on her anyway. Troutpaw was trying to match his sister's volume, but failed to do so. He finally locked eyes on his parents to see both Willowsong and Bristleface calling him by his new name. Mosspaw stood up with pride as he looked out at the clan. He was an apprentice.
I'm gonna be a RiverClan warrior.